If it is cybersecurity and GRC that you're searching for, then you are at the right place. CyberJA is a place where I, Richie Perry, discuss all things cybersecurity and GRC. And in this presentation, I will be outlining best practices for PCI DSS network security compliance. So before we actually get into looking at those best practices, let us have an understanding of what PCI DSS is, what it's all about, especially for those who are new to cybersecurity and on the GRC space, and you want to start looking at this compliance framework and how it is applied within the financial sector. Now, PCI DSS, that stands for the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, right? So the PCI DSS, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, is an information security standard for organizations that handle branded credit cards from the major card schemes. The PCI standard is mandated by the card brands but administered by the Payment Card Industry Security Standards Council. Now let us look at what is PCI DSS compliance. And PCI DSS, as I mentioned, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard compliance is adherence to the set of policies and procedures developed to protect credit, debit, and cash card transactions and prevent the misuse of cardholders' personal information. So pretty much as it relates to compliance, then PCI, this standard outlines all the necessary controls, policies, every single element that is used to protect your network in terms of having a secure network, including firewalls to protect consumer data, data protection, risk management, access control, monitoring, maintenance. So this compliance framework pretty much outlines all that is required to put security measures in place to ensure that all transactions involving cards, debit cards, credit cards relating to various customers are highly protected in whichever environment these components are used. Now, with that said, what are these best practices as it relates to, let's just go back quickly, all right? The best practices for PCI DSS network security compliance. So we're going to be looking at all the best practice as it relates to the network meeting the network security compliances. All right. So what are these best practices? First one is to create a clear separation with proper network segmentation. So what it is saying as it relates to the card holders data, then there must be a clear separation with proper network segmentation of the card holders data environment and card holder data from the rest of the network. Even if you have a flat network, it is important to segment it to logically isolate sensitive data. If you fail to do so, since all systems will have access to each other in a flat, unsegmented network, then your entire network is subject to PCI DSS regulations. Secondly, you want to look at identify and remediate policy violations in real time by designing alert mechanisms differently than other automated alerts. security professionals are overwhelmed with automatically generated alerts. However, PCI DSS violations need to be addressed as quickly as possible to maintain continuous compliance. Third best practice is to establish consistent, auditable exception designation and management to ensure that violations that have been approved exceptions onto your network don't prompt a failure of your PCI DSS audit. Reasons for exceptions need to be documented, as does the owner, along with a date for expiration and a method for consistently reviewing exceptions prior to expiration. Fourth best practice, you want to institutionalize an enterprise-wide network change workflow process that meets PCI DSS requirements. Your company should automate change processes and execute them through automation to ensure consistency in steps and completion. Fifth best practice is to ensure every network change has a complete audit trail with the who, what, when, and why. The who is important to align to requirements for segregation of duties and for providing documentation for auditors. The what is important to understand modified policies, especially those connecting to PCI regulated work zones. The when is important to understand adherence to a change window, identify emergency changes, or flag unscheduled and undocumented changes as anomalous behavior for investigation. The why aspect is critical for ensuring effective reporting for auditors, particularly in consideration of retaining necessary violation as exceptions. The sixth best practice is to validate every network change. So validate every network change with things, for example, risk analysis based on your security policy to determine whether access control configurations violate PCI DSS. Approval for the business owner to close the change request tickets as complete and close the process. Implementation according to the PCI compatible network change workflow to ensure consistent adherence to PCI DSS process requirements. The seventh best practice is to ensure that access controls protecting cardholder data adhere to guidelines such as every rule as a comment that includes a date for regular recertification or expiration. Every rule as a log. No rules with any in the source, destination, and service. No rules with risky service. 8. Enforce proper documentation of every access rule to ensure your audit preparedness with things such as business justification, business owner, application name, expiration or recertification date. 9. Best practice, mandate that a firewall and cloud security groups logs are kept for at least 12 months for retrieval during your PCI DSS audit and align to data retention best practices. The 10th best practice is to automate the rule cleanup and recertification process. And this is done to ensure all rules comply with PCI DSS. So there we have the best practices for compliance with PCI DSS network security. And these are: 1. Create a clear separation with proper network segmentation. 2. Identify and remediate policy violations. 3. Establish consistent, auditable exception designation and management. 4. Institutionalize an enterprise-wide network change workflow process. 5. Ensure every network change has a complete audit trail. 6. Validate every network change. 7. Ensure that access controls protecting cardholder data adhere to the various requirements. Enforce proper documentation of every access rule. 9. Mandate that firewall and cloud security groups logs are kept. And 10. Automate the rule cleanup and recertification process. So there we have it. Best practices for PCI DSS network security compliance. See you in future presentations when we explore other best practices as cybersecurity and GRC professionals. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and turn on the notification bell for all future updates.